And he just grabs the cash and he's like, I gotta go, sorry. I hear there's a saying that you should never go to the grocery store when you're hungry. I wouldn't know this because I'm a man and the women should do the shopping. However, the same saying could be true about the car business. You should never buy a car when you're desperate. It's ironic because I actually say this having caught a ride down to Atlanta with my buddy Arnie and not having a ride home. I had 3 prospects lined up of potential cars to buy, and so far none of them have gone through. Now, I have heard from a critic of Cannonball that there's a thing called airplanes that get you places faster, but I would prefer to drive, and so I'm going to try to buy a car in the next 12 hours to get me home. But that goes against the moral of the story, which is don't buy a car when you're desperate. Now, in the car business, it's essentially a journey of ups and downs. It's feast or famine. You have good months, you have bad months, and it all kind of evens out. And a few years ago, I was having an exceptionally bad month. It was June. I feel like every June, that's my bad month. And it was like 3 weeks into June, and I had not bought a single car. If I don't buy any cars in June, I don't have any cars to sell for July and August. So this was a problem. I found this 1985 911 Targa on Craigslist. I'm seemingly a Porsche expert. This is what I do for a living. Other people pay me to tell them whether or not to buy a Porsche and how much to pay for it. You'd think I'd know a little something. Well, I had previously sold a couple similar Targas, and I think I'd sold them around 35 grand, and I had a few residual leads of people that wanted them. So I thought, all right, this one looks good. Had like 100,000 miles. It was black on burgundy. It said it was in really nice condition, some service records. It had come from North Carolina, so it was a rust-free car. And I think the guy wanted around 29 grand. So I grabbed a friend, drove the 2 hours to go look at it. And I made the first mistake in shrewd negotiating. I brought a trailer. You never bring a trailer to buy a car. I also brought cash because that's what the guy wanted. So we get there, and sure enough, it's a black on burgundy 911 Targa. The guy's a firefighter, and we pull into the back of the fire station, and there's the car. He had driven it to work that morning, or a week before, because I guess they kind of live there. So I will go to look at it, and it's a little bit rough. The rear is sitting kind of low, which I'm like, well, it's probably because it's parked on a hill, but really I knew that the rear shocks were going bad. And it was a full leather car, which means the front dash and the rear shelf were leather, and they were both kind of warped and pulling up, as some of them do, but certainly worse than any I had seen before. But I chose to overlook that too. The car had some aftermarket bits on it, exhaust and stereo, kind of the typical. I'm like, all right, well, it's a clean Carfax, so let's check it out. So I started up, and it seemed to run okay until I went to try to test drive it. It just kept dying, and it would start and run for a few seconds, and then it would die. I'm like, all right, well, it's probably something simple. It runs fine when it does run fine, so it's not like it's smoking or anything like that. I mean, I really just didn't want to leave without doing a car deal. So my other problem was that he said, I think he was firm at 29,000 or 30,000, and I brought 30 grand in cash, and he knew I brought 30 grand in cash. That's the second rule of negotiation, is you always bring less cash than they say they're willing to accept, at least in your front pocket, and you have the rest of the cash in your glove box or in the other pocket. And you split that cash up too, so however much you negotiate up to, you go, oh, well, I only had this much cash on me. Well, I didn't do that because, again, I was hungry. So I start to count out the cash for him, and he's got the title there, and we get just about done counting the cash, and the fire bell rings. No joke. And he just grabs the cash, and he's like, I gotta go. Sorry. 911 call. We gotta go. They all jump in the fire truck, take off, sirens blaring. And I'm sitting there with a title to a car that doesn't run, and I can't get in my trailer because all the muscly firefighters left, and I think I brought the trailer without the winch because I was expecting it to just run and drive on, and I had to just sit there and wait. No cash, no car. I mean, the car was there, but it wasn't mine yet. In the hour that I sat there waiting, I'm going, this car isn't really that nice. I really wish I could just leave right now and not buy it. But I would be $30,000 short if I left at that moment because he had my cash. And I think he knew that too. It was perfect timing for that fire bell to ring. So I was just hoping that his desperation to sell this car did not mean that he took the cash with him and ran straight into a fire with it. But given that it was only one fire truck that left, I was pretty sure it was somebody that needed help up the stairs or something like that. Or maybe a feral cat in a tree, but I don't know who would call 911 to get a feral cat rescued out of a tree. Certainly I wouldn't. Anyway, waited for what seemed like and was an eternity for him to come back, and they finally came back from the call, and we loaded my new car into the trailer. And I drove home for 2 hours going, I wish I hadn't bought this car. Now, me being the cannonballer, I had planned the timing perfectly that we would leave Columbus long before rush hour, and this would be a quick trip down and back. However, because of the fire call, we didn't leave until rush hour, and so it took an extra hour to get home. And we had to stop for dinner, and just the whole thing became this big debacle and afternoon of great regret. So I got the car back and took it to the local Porsche service shop to get it fixed up for sale, and of course they found all sorts more wrong with it than I had because I wasn't looking that hard. And while it was a relatively simple fix to get it running properly, it still cost a couple $1,000s to get it fixed up nicely. And even after I got it fixed up, it was still kind of a polished turd because it was never that nice of a car to begin with. And I ended up selling it for $25,000. So I took about a $6,000 haircut on that deal. So I had ended my buying drought by buying a pretty terrible car. But sometimes a drought is a lot better than a loss. And in that case, that lesson cost me about $6,000. And of course, me thinking I'm the shrewd negotiator and the Porsche expert, I was actually the idiot because clear as day, it was printed on the title that he had got when he bought it from the lady in North Carolina that he had paid a whopping $10,000 for the car. So he was the shrewd negotiator on all counts. And for all I know, he had called in the fire himself so that he could make a run out after he got the cash and I couldn't change my mind about buying the car.